Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unmodern Podcast, the podcast where we have unscripted, unapologetic, and uncomfortable conversations that affects everyday people. If you've ever had an outlook, thought, or an opinion that modern day society told you to be silent on, that you would get in trouble for, or if you've ever heard the words, probably shouldn't say that, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Alfred, a husband, father, and an adventure-seeking kind of guy who over the years has learned to have a positive outlook on life, regardless of what society throws at me. So if you're ready to listen, let's go. Mr. Cam MacDougall, thank you so much for being on the podcast, brother. How you doing today?
Doing very well, Alfred. My pleasure, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast. For those that don't know, I first met you down in Costa Rica, mutual acquaintances of ours, Mr. Mike Prince and Trevor Turnbull. I know you know Mike a bit more. You were an intimidating figure, man. You knew how to take control of the room. It was intimidating, but it was also admirable. We did a great breathwork session together, and you had total command. And I was hooked right from the beginning where this guy knows what he's doing. He knows his stuff. It was one of the more enlightening experiences I had in Costa Rica on that retreat. And we connected afterwards, and I've been following you ever since. I've seen you kind of rebrand, and really focus on your current embodied message and your high performance and your men's performance message that you have currently going on. It was a pleasure to get my ass kicked by you during the Warrior Games. So thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate you. Shout out to all the men in the Warrior Games. Shout out to all you guys. And yeah, I just want you to tell the fans listening and the listeners kind of your story. And then we're really going to get into what you offer, because I believe you are one of, if not the most positively masculine figures to allow men to grow in any facet. I can think of anything from a stay-at-home dad to a single, super successful 8-9-figure CEO. Your modalities touch every aspect of that. And I love that. So I want the listeners to hear that. But let's get to the story as to why you are qualified to talk about this stuff, how your experience has shaped your ability to be a coach in these spaces.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for those kind words. Receiving all of that, yeah, it feels really good to hear that, and it's an honor to be that figure in your life, man. Truly, truly, truly. You hit the nail on the head when you asked me this question. You asked about experience. I didn't choose to be a coach. I didn't go, you know what, I'm going to be a coach. I had people start asking me, hey, can you teach me how to live like you? And this was before coaching was really what it is today. The reason people asked me that was not because I did some course, not because I read some book, not because I did some program. People asked me that because I was alchemizing my life experience into higher levels of performance and fulfillment. And people could feel that. And the only way that I really got there was from fucking up a lot. Like, I made a lot of mistakes. And what I chose in those moments was to learn and evolve through those mistakes, as opposed to let them sideswipe me and take me out of life. So we can go as deep into my past as you like, but I know you kind of want to focus more on the present. But on a high level, I was a high school dropout. I got caught up in drugs, violence, gangs at a really young age. Ended up spending a lot of time in juvenile detention as an adolescent. Spent my 18th birthday in juvenile detention. Escaped that world by a hair. It could have gone in another direction very easily. But thankfully, by the grace of God, I was moved in the right direction. I was pushed to leave that world before things really got really bad, and found cooking, started working in kitchens and working my way out of that world, fell in love with business, ended up in finance, and, became conventionally successful. And, it's kind of a cliche now in the coaching world to hear it. Like, I had everything and then I realized it wasn't what I wanted. And that is really what happened. I got to a point in my life where I was making good money. I was, I had the the nice place, the relationship, the truck, the watches, the clothes, the this, the that, the travel, all the things, and realized that I was creating the same life over and over and over again in patterns. And this is really the foundation of my work is we live life in patterns. And if we don't have the awareness to acknowledge and isolate the components of that pattern, we get stuck on loop for our whole lives. And we can change what it looks like on the outside, but on the inside, we reproduce the same thing over and over and over again. So long story short, I kept reproducing the same painful cycles in my life, which pushed me to do inner work and pushed me to do inner inquiry, which led me down the path that you see me on now. So that's kind of it, high level.
Yeah, that's awesome. One area I want to highlight on that, because this seems to be a struggle that I'm currently dealing with, and I've been dealing with it for multiple years. And I've mentioned this to you in the past. I don't remember the episode that you did that you discussed this, but when we met in Costa Rica, I was drawn to that men's retreat because of a time at the tail end of a global pandemic, the ebbs and flows in my life, and kind of the persona that I was putting out there was on so big extremes of the spectrum. I almost couldn't handle it, I guess. I almost kind of got lost. I was like, when Trump got voted into office, I'm not going to get political with this, but I became a polarizing conservative figure where I was like, I couldn't handle anything other than conservatism. And then the pandemic happened and I got into ultra freedom and I got into, anti-authority, and I found myself rigid. Nobody talked to me. I lost, I wasn't even able to talk to my neighbors. Like, and I don't blame them. Just so we're clear, like I was a dick. Like, yeah, I was not a palatable person to be around, truthfully. And then I went down to Costa Rica and I started doing all these things. I discovered breath work, cold exposure. I discovered, a little bit of meditation. I have a hard time slowing down my mind. I'm a type A personality. I've kind of accepted that, I guess. But there's these ebbs and flows, and you just discussed it where you went drugs, juvenile detention, then you reach this on the up of like cooking, then you reach finance, and then you almost intentionally go the other direction. And words that I've been discovering lately is things like contentment and things like simplify and efficiency. Talk to me a little bit about what seems to be every man's journey is these ebbs and flows in life, chosen or not chosen. I want you to kind of explain to me if you believe it's important to be willing and able to dial certain things back, maybe image, maybe finance, maybe location, maybe social circles, if you know what you want. It's probably not a good idea to do that if you're in complete chaos and you kind of burn it all down and you have nothing else to go to. But if you have a goal, if you have a mission, if you have a dream, talk to me about that. Maybe some emotions a man might experience, or maybe some complications that may arise from that they kind of have to just, this is just a repercussion of it, but it will get better.
Great question. Great question. I think about Einstein's quote when you say that, and that's that, a problem can't be solved by the mind that created it.
Ooh,
I look at that as environments as well. We can't solve a problem in the environment that created it. Our friends influence our subconscious. Where we live influences our subconscious. What we watch influences our subconscious. What we listen to influences our subconscious. And so the person that you are today is a manifestation of all the inputs. And so if you live your life in with those same inputs coming in time and time and time again, you are going to create the same reality time and time and time again. So in life, I feel there's these moments, there's these catalytic moments where we have to step away from those environments in order to get the clarity required to actually figure out who we are. And so the tendency for men, the tendency for humans is to stay in what we know, to stay in the comfort, to have the conversations we're used to having, to be in the relationships with the people we're used to being in relationships with, to have the jobs we're used to having. But that creates the outcome we're living now. And you get this interesting kind of situation where a lot of people, they want to change, but they don't want to change, right? They want to change their life, but they don't want to change anything about their life. And you get into this interesting paradox of struggle and pain. So if you go to the comfort, if you go to what you know, you're never going to be able to figure out who you really are, because it's really hard to tell what's yours versus what's been given to you by the people and the environments that surround you. And so there's a required kind of separation, or what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, there's a removal required from these environments. And that removal can be scary. That removal can be isolating. That removal can feel very bad in conventional terms. But it's required to get space to actually listen to who you really truly are. And so, yeah, it's going to suck. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that come up. Yeah, you're going to piss people off. Yeah, you're going to harm people. You know, I listened to what you're sharing about, you know, your time when Trump was elected, your time with COVID. I was the same. I'm a renegade. I don't like playing by the rules. I was isolated myself completely. And even though I was an asshole, and even though I, you know, probably hurt a lot of people, it was a necessity to not get caught up in the environmental spiral that everyone was in, so I could really figure out who I was in that circumstance. And so, yes, it sucks. Yes, it's painful. Yes, you're going to go through hesitation. Yes, you're going to go towards comfort. Yes, you're going to want to stay the way that you are. You're going to want to keep the same relationships, have the same friends, live in the same city, do all the same things, but then you're going to stay the same person. So leaning into the fear of being alone, leaning into the kind of isolating factors, in my opinion, is essential for growth, but it's temporary. You don't want to stay there. You meet way too many people that stay there, and then they spiral into this other avenue of their environment of being alone and all these things. And so you got to have a purpose for it. There's got to be an intention. And if the intention is, I need to silence all this shit on the outside so I can figure out who I am on the inside, do it. Know that that's going to come with ramifications. You're going to lose friends. You're going to lose people you love. You're going to have to do that temporarily to figure out who you are. And then once you get to a place of knowing, then you step back into those environments and you show up more powerfully. You show up with more love. You show up as a reflection of who you are. And people go, whoa, what are you doing? And at that point, then you can come back and really show up as the person that you want to be. But you got to rip that Band-Aid off. If you don't rip that Band-Aid off, you're fucked. So that's the way that I see those types of circumstances. And yeah, there's gonna be a ton of narratives. There's gonna be a ton of fear. Everything associated with the death of something is gonna be present, right? Because you're basically killing who you think you are in order to find out who you really are. And in doing that, there's a lot of pain and suffering and challenge, but that's the friction required that leads to evolution.
Yeah, that's a great answer, man. It summarized kind of your messaging that I've been following you for a long time. Summarizes it really, really well, using a lot of metaphors to make it kind of, you know, understandable at a very low level, which is good because a lot of people, this is new, right? I've been multiple years into this and I still feel like I'm not even scratching the surface because my pendulum swings, right? And it's different for everybody, but I feel like for me, I have collateral damage if I make this choice, right? I'd have to be aligned with my wife, my kids. You know, I have a business that really landlocks me to currently where I'm at. So in terms of drastically changing my environment and, you know, moving to Thailand or something's not really an option. But there's other things that I can do, and focusing on that and understanding that, because it's so hard to get caught up in the icing on the cake that is presented to us these days. You know, oh, just meditate for 10 days and you'll be better off. It's like, you know, and you use the word intention. If I don't know why I'm meditating, it's not, I mean, it might calm me down and reset me a little bit, but it's not going to have the desired outcome. Same thing with cold plunging, same thing with yoga, same thing with, you know, any modality you choose to do. And you had said something really powerful a while back, and it was about Costa Rica, and you were talking about why you felt like you had the need to come back to Vancouver or Victoria, where you currently reside. And you had said that in a lot of these places, and you used Costa Rica as an example, but I'm going to use, you know, maybe like a Thailand or an Indonesia or a Spain or a Portugal. This idea of going to a sunny destination, doing way less is going to be fulfilled. You said that you were surrounded by people that were waiting for life to come to them, and you needed to be in an environment that people went and got life. And talk to me a little bit about that concept, where it's great to do things that slow you down. It's great to do things that are good for you, like workout and yoga. But what's the intention? What are you driving to? Because if that's all you do and there's no purpose and there's no, I don't want to say end game, but there's no consistent climb, there's no consistent growth, there's no consistent, you know, getting better at whatever it is you want to get better at, you kind of still feel stuck. You're just maybe in a sunnier destination. And that's not really going to solve your problem. So talk to me a little bit about that, about rather than waiting for life to come to you, you going to get life.
Mm-hmm. What I found being a digital nomad for 5 years, traveling around, was a lot of people are running. A lot of people are avoiding. A lot of people think that an environmental change externally will change an environmental state internally. And that isn't true. The only thing that is real is our internal world. And so, traveling around and going to all these places, I met a lot of people that were running that were hoping that running would sort their problems out. Or they got caught in thinking healing was the answer and just kept healing and healing and healing and healing and healing and healing and doing 100 ayahuasca ceremonies and thinking that that was going to do it, or doing breath work every day and thinking that that was going to do it, or hiring 50 coaches and thinking that was going to do it. And what I realized is if we're living in reactivity, then we're screwed. As simple as that. If we're running from something out of reaction, or if we're trying to heal from something out of reaction, or if we're trying to, create a business out of reaction, then it's not going to be a reflection of who we are. It's a reflection of who we want to be to avoid something else. Right? So regardless of where I was in the world, if we're reacting to our circumstances, we are not intentionally creating our lives. And what I'm looking at for myself now, because really that's all I can truly speak of is myself. I want to figure out who I am on a deeper level every single day. I don't care about what I create anymore. I don't care about what I build. I don't care about the money that I have in the conventional sense. What I care about is, how can I become more of myself? And if more of myself is financially abundant, running a successful business, doing all those things, great. But it has to be in perfect alignment with who I am. And what I realized, kind of speaking to your point of all these people that were waiting for life to come to them, they didn't know their needs. They didn't know their values. They weren't setting targets based on those components. And ultimately, they had no direction in really where they were going. And you get a lot of this in the spiritual world. You get a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm doing spiritual work, so that's my purpose. Yet they're not of service, right? And they're struggling to make money. And they're frustrated because they can't pay rent. And they're in this fragmented state. And you're like, well, okay, is that really who you want to be? Is that who you are? Because it doesn't sound like there's intentional creation. It sounds like you're living from reactivity, right? So moving now into going after purpose, going after goals, going after life, it's an inside job. It's figuring out who I am at the deepest level, what I really need, what I really value, and creating the freedom to live that way. And as long as I'm constantly doing that, then great. And what I realized in Costa Rica was, I don't want to just wake up and surf and live on the beach all day. That's great. But my big part of who I am is to be of service to people that I can help. I didn't understand Costa Rican culture. I'm not Costa Rican. I couldn't go to the prisons there and empathize with the poverty. I never had that. I couldn't talk to people about what it was like to grow up in a shack that's now being pushed out by, a multi-million-dollar hotel. I don't know anything about that. So I realized that I wasn't able to really be myself there because I couldn't understand enough about how people were living to be of service. And so I came back here because I can work in prisons here. I've been to prison here, well, juvie here, right? I've been involved in the drug game here. I have friends that are still in it here, right? I can relate to men who are really busy, who, don't really know where this world's going or what to do with the political situation here, right? So what I realized is that I needed to be somewhere that was more in alignment with who I was and how I wanted to show up and how I wanted to serve this world. And so I came back, as opposed to kind of living this retired life before I really brought forth what I wanted to bring through in life.
That's really cool. That reminds me of there's a video going around on social media about Denzel Washington. He's promoting the new Gladiator movie. He's in that new Gladiator movie. I haven't seen it yet. I definitely got to go see it. And he talks and he's talking to this girl and he's kind of almost acting like her therapist. And she asks him at one point, but he says, the first part of your life you learn, the second part of your life you earn, and the third part of your life you return. And that was a really cool concept. So you might want to check that one out. I'll send it to you here when we're done if you haven't seen it yet. And that's a really cool concept. And talking about people's intention and aligning their values and all that, I want to bring to limelight one of the simple services you offer on your website, embodied.co, is the 5 bodies and the 5 body assessment. And I want you to kind of share that because the first time I took it was shortly after we met in Costa Rica. I'm like, what's this guy all about? He's kind of cool. He's got all these offerings and stuff. But because you were in Costa Rica, I almost felt like you were out of reach. So I was pretty stoked when you came back to Western Canada and you're a short flight away. I was jazzed at that, no doubt. But talk to me about the 5 bodies, kind of the concept around that and how people can gain value out of it. Because I think it goes to exactly what you're speaking. If people aren't really sure, or if they're kind of in this dark cloud of, struggling with their morality and their values and, collateral damage in their life because maybe they're relied on and they're a pillar in their family. So they're in this hyper earn mode because that's their best way to support family, or vice versa, where maybe they were let go and they don't have an abundance in that way. So they're going downhill and their trajectory is in the wrong direction. The 5 bodies seem to really summarize that really well. So touch on that, please. I think that's really valuable.
Definitely. So the 5 bodies are nothing new. I can't take credit for that. They're just my version of the koshas in yoga, that I learned from Sadhguru. But what I realized when I started studying the koshas is I started realizing that my life followed kind of that pathway of evolution. And what I started thinking about was, okay, well, why did I follow that path? Why did it work for me? And ultimately, how can I use it to help others? And so the 5 bodies, the best way that I describe it is life is kind of like a hunt, right? We're always kind of hunting. And I like the warrior archetype, so I use hunting as a great example. When we're hunting, we have to figure out what our target is, right? So that's step number 1. Before we even get into the 5 bodies, we got to understand what our target is, right? And this is where you got to understand your needs, right? You got 5 kids at home. You're not going turkey hunting, right? You need a moose, right? You got to understand your values. You got to understand, how this plays into the bigger picture. And then once you get to that point, and you know what your needs are and your values are, you can actually start to pick a target on what kind of animal you want to hunt. That's where the 5 bodies come in. Once we've decided and we know what we're hunting, then the first step is you got to get physically strong, right? You're not throwing a spear or pulling that arrow back on a bow without physical strength. So you got to get physically strong. And the first thing that I did when I was going through my journey was I started working out in juvenile detention. I was taught how to redirect energy into training. So I had to get my physical body in order. The second thing that we have to do when we're on a hunt, once we've pulled that bow back and we're staring at that target, is we got to get focused, right? So this is the mental body. This is staying focused on the target that we are aiming at. When I was getting out of that world in my life, I had to stay focused on washing dishes, wanting to be a prep cook, wanting to be a line cook, wanting to work my way up in the kitchen so that I could leave that world behind. So I had to stay ruthlessly focused. I had to keep training and stay focused. The third thing is the energy body. So if we're hunting and we've pulled back the bow and we're focused on the target, the next thing that we got to do is we got to be able to see the trajectory of the arrow, right? We got to take wind into account, rain into account, movement of the target into account. We've got to take our hunting party into account. We've got to be aware of where that trajectory is going so we can ultimately hit it. And so for me, my vision when I was washing dishes and getting out of the game became, I want to go finish high school. I want to go back and graduate, right? So that became the focal point of like my direction of where I wanted to go. The fourth thing is the emotional body. So once the bow's pulled back, we're focused on the target. We see the trajectory of the arrow. The fourth piece is we got to harness the emotions, right? If we get too excited and we release too quick, we're going to miss. If we hesitate and we release too late, we're going to miss. If we get frustrated and we shoot out of anger, we're going to miss, right? So we got to learn to integrate our emotions into becoming more focused, more dialed, and better at hitting targets. And for me, my challenge was I always fought. So I had to learn to regulate my emotions when I was trying to get out of the game, because otherwise I'd be thrown back in prison, right? Or juvie, but it would have been prison at that time because I was over 18. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle is we got the spiritual body, the fifth piece of the puzzle. So we've pulled back the bow, we've locked into the target, we see the trajectory of the arrow, we've harnessed our emotions. And then what's left to do? We got to release the arrow. We got to trust. We got to put our faith in God that we've done everything that we possibly can to ultimately hit that target perfectly. And in my opinion, a fulfilling life is perpetually being on the hunt, hunting different targets, different creatures, and evolving as a warrior, evolving as a man, evolving as an individual. And when we do that, we become unstoppable. And you have to constantly work on those 5 bodies in tangent to get better and better at them, to get better at hitting targets. So that's how we incorporate the 5 bodies into, needs, values, and ultimately targets.
Yeah, that's really good. I love the warrior archetype as well, how you're wording that. I feel it's very primal, speaks to me as a man. And I really enjoy that. I think you could use that metaphor in almost anything in life in terms of however you want to, go after whatever it is that you're going after, an animal, a career, women, whatever it may be. The one thing I like about it is, and you didn't really say anything in your explaining of the 5 bodies, is what currently tells people that they're on the right track. Didn't talk about your status, didn't talk about your income, didn't talk about your, are you in Beverly Hills or are you in Compton? You didn't talk about that stuff, right? Because it's, I don't want to say it's completely irrelevant, but it's nowhere near as important. And I think the physical component is where you really bring in your area of focus, because I think that is the foundation. It's the reason why you said it's the first one, right? If you were to work yourself backwards and you were to have faith and spiritual trust that it's going to go the right way, but you did nothing else to ensure that the arrow, went where it's supposed to go, to piggyback on your metaphor, you're not as likely going to hit your target. You're likely going to miss a lot. And there's a good chance that at one point you're going to get disincentivized to even want to try. Right. So then you're either going to outsource or you're just not going to be able to do what you're called to do. And then same thing in the middle, right? You're emotional. If you're an emotional person and you don't have your shit in order, or you're very reactive, or you don't know what's going to happen when it happens, and you live, with anxiety with the future, I'm unsure, or you live with depression, or like, but I failed in the past and stuff. You got to have it in check, right? But I love the physical aspect, because this is something that I'm struggling with. I'm not physically anywhere near where I want to be by all metrics, and it's something I want to focus on, and I've been struggling on how to get there. And your warrior games were an eye-opening thing for me, and we can talk about that here, because I think you have a new set of warrior games coming up that I want to encourage people to check out. It's so much more powerful doing it with other people, suffering as a group and going through the shit and doing the running challenge and the push-up challenge and all that shit that we did. It was ruthless. It was fucking ruthless. And doing it with other people and seeing the Tygas of the world, shout out Tyga, doing it of the world, and just like him being a physical specimen that he is at the age that he is. I mean, we address like, damn, that's so good. Where you lift each other up, right? You set new baselines, right? You're motivated by people's accomplishments, but you're also driven by other people's struggles. When you're given in a very small microcosm the ability to be called up through other people, and you have this window, you're more likely to do it because it's for others. There's this band of brothers mentality that is very demonized nowadays. I actually just had a discussion with a girl that gave me some feedback on a podcast I released this week with my wife. It was super powerful. A lot of feminine energy around that. And people were saying, soft approaches and inquisitive about how we do certain things. And talking to a guy like you, and especially the men in the warrior games I was privileged to experience that with, you can be brutally honest with each other. You can kind of get to the point. You can get rid of, the smoke and mirrors and just get right at it. And it's like, one of the guys in the circles had eye surgery. He's like, I can't do what I'm supposed to do. And everyone else like, got you, no problem. And Simon Sinek had a really cool concept that I talked about with a friend of mine about how to build trust. Women are so much better at this than men. And this is something that we have to address as men, is you build trust by asking for help, not for offering help. Right. And it's hard for me as a man to ask a woman to pull me up, to ask my daughters, to ask my wife, to ask my wife's friends. It's the men in my life that brought me to my new levels. Period. End of story. Women may have balanced me out, may have given me maybe my softer corners and allowed me to maybe get a bit more, even keel and live in the median. But my most euphoric moments and my hardest moments were with men. Period. End of story. And I'm thankful for that. And I feel like there's so many issues like that that men are struggling with nowadays, but that's a big one. That is a big one. Is this lone wolf syndrome? It's going around online. If anything negative in your life, cut it out. If you have a friend that doesn't call you, don't call them. You're unintentionally isolating yourself, thinking that this jackass that lives in California telling you how you need to live your life and cultivate your social circles, this motherfucker is getting paid $10,000 a seminar. Like, he is not the guy you want to listen to get yourself out of a funk in terms of your circle, in terms of your support network, because doing it alone, while yes, it's possible, and you kind of have to start there, you kind of have to build yourself to a degree. You need to do it as a collective, man. It has to be done as a collective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a challenge, right? And I, as someone that had to leave my friends at a younger age to get my shit in order, I do understand the premise of moving away from people. And at the same time, we don't want to isolate ourselves for too long. Like, I really feel like there's a lot of work to do as men inside on our own, but there's a window in which we do that. And if we go past it, it can be very troublesome. Like for me, I go and I sat ayahuasca by myself. I went, I go on trips by myself. I've traveled a lot by myself. I've spent a lot of time in the jungles by myself. And those have been some of the most powerful, profound moments. But what I've learned is you need the other side. You need the squad. You need the crew. You need to have that community on the other side to welcome you back in. It's like you go into the jungle to learn, and then you get welcomed back in by the village. You go to the jungle to learn, you get welcomed back in by the village. And it's that duality that I think is so important. But kind of parallel to the way that the whole world's going is there's these polarizing views where people are now like, I don't know who that is on social media that you're talking about, but there's millions of or hundreds of them, thousands of them. But there's this energy of like, you need to be alone. You need to just do it. You need to get rid of everybody. You need to isolate. You need to cut out. And it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe for a while, but then you need to come back and you need to open your heart and you need to make true lasting connections with people. Otherwise, you're going to be successful and you're going to be alone. You're going to have money and no one to share it with. You're going to be looking at sunsets and talking to yourself for the rest of your life. So it's really the art of intentionally, once again, stepping into the jungle to do your inner work on your own, to go on your warrior missions. And then it's coming back out into the village and being with your people and really cultivating those deep connections. So really finding that duality. And we're living in a world now where duality is becoming harder and harder to see. There's just polarity, polarity, polarity. And this is a problem because we are dual beings, right? You have winter, you have summer, you have sun, you have rain, you have happy, you have sad. We need isolation, we need community. We need to have these things in balance. And a lot of the mental health challenges that are coming up are because we're either too deep in our community that we can't think for ourselves, or we're too alone that we don't have any perspective, right? And so we get caught in this tug of war. So I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
It's this thing where I find people, and you said it perfectly, everything's polarized. You can't have both, right? The concept of there can't be light without darkness. It's either you're one or the other. You can't live, a balanced life. It's, to go back to politics because it's easily digestible. You're conservative or you're liberal, you're Republican or Democrat. It's, you're woke or you're non-woke. It's this duality where it's like you can kind of live in both. Both have value. There's a positive and a negative side to a battery for a reason. If you only have one or the other, it doesn't fucking work. right? Period. And that's probably the best way to understand it is there has to be this ability to kind of live, I don't want to say a dual life because that's incorrect, but just be able to take what you need to get to where you want to go from all different modalities and how it, so if you don't want to be too soft like they do in Costa Rica and wait for life to come to you, but you might get a value out of meditation, you might get value out of yoga, you might get value out of breath work. And it's just this extra step. It's this extra experience you're gaining to get to where you want to go. And my issue over the last few years is I have my hand in too many cookie jars. Is I'm very confident I know where I want to go. It's just so abrasive to the immediate negative impacts that it's going to cause both me and other people around me. And it's so difficult, and I want to touch on it when it comes to money, because money is a big one, right? Everyone needs to be money. You need to make 10 figures or $10,000 a month. You need to make 6-figure business, drop shipping online, all this crap. You need to have multiple side hustles and all this stuff. And I know for me, I'm way too attached to money, and I'm slowly finding myself detaching. I found myself when I didn't have a clear vision or a clear mission, I'd be on Facebook Marketplace looking for a car I could flip, or I'd want that new materialistic thing that I haven't really had because I've worked hard enough to get it. And I'm so attached with that items, and what people see from the outside is a direct reflection of me when I'm now associating that negatively. I almost look at the lifted truck as like, man, hope that guy's doing okay. Or I look at that person with the Rolex, but I also look, it's like, marriage is shit, man. Like, I hope you're doing all right. And talk to me a little bit about, as men, because we're called to provide and protect biologically, whether that's through money or through just physicality or whatever it may be, and we're no longer as rooted in our tribes and rooted in our social circles, and we're really lone wolfing it more than we ever have, our attachment to money seems to really be hurting us. And that's my perspective. I kind of want to get your perspective of how does money play into let's use the 5 bodies for example, right? It's not one of the 5 bodies. It's not one of the things that you really need to focus on to build a good foundation. But if you're married to it, it's going to be really hard to integrate that in something that it really doesn't belong there.
Yeah, money's an interesting one. And I like this question. It's making me think. Money isn't a part of the 5 bodies, but it's a part of the value system that I give to guys before they go into the 5 bodies. So we have to address the topic of money because it's abundance. It's the common currency. It's what we use to basically spin up energy, right? And what we use to attribute value. I love money. I think money is fantastic. I think it's beautiful. But I go by the philosophy of Yvon Chouinard, and that is money is an amplifier. Money is an amplifier. If you have love in your heart, money's going to amplify that. If you have fear in your heart, money's going to amplify that. If you have insecurity in your heart, money's going to amplify that. If you have scarcity in your heart, doesn't matter how much money you have, you're going to amplify that. In fact, probably the more money you make, the more scarce you're going to get, right? So it's understanding the energetics of money that are important. And the problem that I see a lot of men fall into is they make money their purpose. And when you make money your purpose, you're in big trouble, because that means you attribute your value as a human in the amount of money that you make. And so you're basically trying to fill a hole your whole life, trying to prove that you're more and more valuable. Every time you spend, you feel less valuable. Every time you earn, you feel more valuable. And you get caught in this dynamic of push and pull. But the way that I look at money is money circulates energy. Money supports us. Money helps us create. And so it's a very important thing to look at. But the important thing to look at isn't your relationship to money. It's the thought or the feeling, the sponsoring feeling behind that is going to really have the effect. Because I know some people that are wealthy beyond means, and the money doesn't make them happy. They have everything in the world. I work with people that have everything in the world: boats, cars, multiple houses, travel all the time, any designer clothes you could ever want. Money didn't bring them fulfillment. Knowing themselves did. Sticking to their values did, right? I also know very, very wealthy people who are very connected to who they are, and they absolutely love their money and they have tons of fun with it, and they're extremely fulfilled. On the flip side, I know people who are poor, who are struggling, who don't know themselves and feel like absolute shit. And I know people who are poor, who know themselves, and they're totally at bliss and totally fulfilled. Money is irrelevant. It's all about how you see it play a role in your life and really connect to how it relates to you as a person. The challenge is we have marketing, we have media channels, we have all this bullshit being fed to us all day long saying, buy this, buy that, or you're not this, or you're not that. And so we got to understand the mechanism that's taking place here. We are being fed to believe that money is either the root of all evil or the ultimate freedom. But it's neither. It's whatever we make it to be. And so if we sit there and we go, well, money's the root of all evil, then of course it's going to be the root of all evil. And you're probably never going to have enough of it because you're subconsciously rejecting it. But if you see money as something that helps you get your mission out, that helps you provide for your family, that helps you send your kids to the school they want to go to, create the life they want to live, to buy the land so you can get them into the space away from the chaos, whatever that is, you're going to want to keep working with that energy. You're going to keep wanting to be with that and foster that because those are positive outcomes, right? So it's less about money. Money is this thing that we decide on in our lives. Like, how do we associate to it? What do we need it for? And what do we use it for? And then we deal with all the subconscious bullshit we've racked up over the years of scarcity, fear, insecurity, yada, yada, yada. Right? So really, really connecting in to what money means to you is the important piece of the puzzle. And remembering that it's going to amplify whatever's inside of you. So the sponsoring thought is the most important piece of the puzzle. Are you making money from fear? Or are you making money from love? If you're making money from love, it's going to amplify that. You're making money from fear, it's going to amplify that. That's how I see money.
There's definitely a certain attachment for me with money. We had a single income household for a long time. And, when you wear that hat of, sole provider and, judge, jury, executioner, when it comes to that component of your immediate circle, I tend to put a lot of pressure, right? And I think justifiably so, right? There has to be a degree of an amount brought in. I think the big one that I'm finding now is, and the argument would likely be there's a lot of external influences pushing us to the limit of income because just life is expensive. Everything's getting expensive. I'm a big purveyor of control the controllables, and that's not one of them, right? I can't control the price of gas, can't control interest rates, can't control that shit, right? But I think the word that comes to mind, I think I said it earlier in this podcast, is contentment. Is, be okay to live well below your current means. And I think that gives people flexibility, right? You don't need the big house. You don't need the big truck. You don't need the big things. You don't need to go to nice fancy dinners every day. There's kind of like a campaign going on at my work, and we're calling it the Back to Basics campaign. We talk about soft skills within our industry that we're losing over time because we're becoming so reliant on programs, and we're becoming so reliant on basically non-human shit. And that can really lead into an AI discussion, which we don't need to, I actually don't want to get into today, but just learning the fundamentals of basics. You know what I mean? Knowing that the guy online that's selling you 6-minute abs, he didn't get his abs in 6 minutes. You got to get back to basics. You kind of almost want to have to do the long journey, right? You almost kind of I want this to take a long time. I want this to be difficult. I want this to have to make me overcome my fear mountain kind of thing, right? Because I've been guilty of that. Everything is so efficient. It's all about getting the most out of doing the least. And I fucking hate that mentality. I hate it. I can't stand it. The best things I've done were the things that were the most challenging, that took a long time, things that I had to cultivate over days, months, years. It felt better than getting it just because, or buying it because I can. It tastes different. It feels different. And the fear one is the big one for me because fear wraps itself around uncertainty around anything and everything. If you fucking hate your job, or you don't like your surroundings, or you are just petrified to have the conversation you've been putting off for a long time, man, you will feel so much better when you overcome that fucking mountain. But I know for me, I lived with that insecure fear for years. For years, I was scared of what my image would look like if I did something. I was scared of the ramifications of a decision that I knew I had to make, but maybe somebody else would suffer because of it, or maybe it wouldn't be the result I wanted. And I didn't have the mindset of, well, if I crash and burn here, it's not the end of the line. And there's a very famous saying where it says, if you start over, you're not starting from the beginning, you're starting from experience. Meaning every failure is a new building block. You're not starting back. Like if I went to the gym for the first time 10 years ago and I quit for a long time and I go back, I'm not the same person I was. That experience is going to be completely different. And maybe you can talk about this and because you've probably seen men do this, is first of all, men just reaching out to you is probably a fear component. People reaching out for help is just be like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm at this point where I'm just like, I can't do this. I'm not a man, or I can't do this. I have to drop my walls. That fear aspect in any component of their life, but just overcoming fear. How important is that for people to really understand that you got to do it to really get to where you want to go if you're not happy in your current situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fear is the guidepost. That's the way we got to look at it. And where we're afraid is where the lessons lie. The challenge is you have to be a type of person to see that, right? The challenge with the world right now is most people are blissfully ignorant because it's a lot easier. It's the whole red pill syndrome. Once you take the red pill and you start realizing that you're driving the ship, there's no more excuses, right? When people hesitate because of fear, it's because they don't want to admit that they're really the only thing that could solve whatever is making them scared. They want to think it's external. So if you're coming up against fear and you're letting fear dictate your decisions, that's generally a byproduct of your lack of clarity of where you want to go and lack of confidence to get there, right? Because it's that uncertainty. So let's try to use an example for me. When I decided to pursue this coaching business and really immerse myself in Eastern traditions and move to Bali and learn as much as I could, I had 2 grand in my pocket. And I was like, I'm going to move to Bali indefinitely with 2,000 bucks in my pocket. And I had made a ton of money in finance. I'd spent it all. It was just a mess. Like it was a mess. But I went, fuck it. I know there's something on the other side of this. So I'm going to trust that. And to me, that's the key is you just kind of have to say, fuck it. And you have to do it. But you have to know why you're doing it. And if you know why you're doing it, then you would accept the consequences of doing it. Right. So a lot of people say, well, I don't want to change. I can't change my career because my family. Well, what's on the other side of you scraping the barrel for 6 months, eating rice and beans? What's on the other side of that? If the potential is you're giving your family a life that you never thought you could do before because of an opportunity that you've become aware of, makes eating rice and beans for 6 months a lot easier. If it means selling the house and downsizing and going into a small apartment, then you're going to do it. But you have to understand why. You can't just do it for the sake of it. And this, once again, comes back to knowing who you are, knowing what you're creating, and knowing where you want to go. It's having the right target, right? So really tuning into that is key, because fear, if you have a why that's big enough, that there's a quote by Nietzsche who says, a man with a why to live for can accomplish any how. A man with a why to live for can accomplish any how. If your why is big enough, you can do whatever it is. But if you don't have a big enough why, then you're not going to be able to do it. So I did that when I moved to Bali. When I left the game back in the day and walked up the front stairs of my mom's house with a garbage bag and my clothes over my shoulder and not a dollar to my name, to fully admit that I wasn't working on the rigs, that I'd been selling drugs, that I was, had two houses in Cracktown, downtown East Side. Like, the only reason I did that is because my why was powerful enough. And the only reason I've ended engagements was because my why was so powerful enough. The only reason I packed my stuff and left Canada during COVID was because my why was powerful enough. And people say to me a lot, like, well, you don't have kids. You don't understand. I don't have kids out of choice because my journey doesn't really align to having children right now because of how much I'm wanting to serve and be limber. But I have a ton of clients, tons of clients. And I've worked with hundreds of clients with kids who have done astronomical stuff. Astronomical stuff. I had one client who had to get out of a narcissistic relationship, a mother who had to leave 4 kids with the narcissistic dad for 5 months to get away so that she could come back to herself. Like, think about that. As a mother, you have to leave your kids with a man that you hate and that is awful so that you could get the power to go back and fix it, to ultimately get your kids and bring them into an environment that served them. Most mothers would cringe at the sound of that, but she understood what she needed to do because she knew that she couldn't do it where she was. And it was her idea. It wasn't mine. It came to her eventually, right? But what I'm getting at here is we're professionals at making excuses, but that's just because we don't understand our why enough. If we understand our why and our target at a deep level, we'll make the sacrifices required. Most people are like, well, I don't want to downsize the house and this and that. And it's like, well, then you're not going to get what you want necessarily. So what are you willing to sacrifice to get where you want to go? That's the big question. And a lot of people ask me, they're like, wow, you'd be such a good dad. I have sacrificed not having kids to serve, to move, to learn, to go into all these things. And that's a sacrifice I've made. And now I'm at the age that I'm at, I might not have them, which I had to make peace with. Right. So every single decision is going to come with an element of fear. It's your why and your target that's going to give you the energy to overcome that fear and learn from that fear and use that fear to get where you want to go.
You're reminding me of John Cena. I don't know if you know about his story, if you've ever watched podcasts with him or interviews with him. For those that don't know, John Cena is the #1 fulfiller of Make-A-Wish Foundation. I think he's done over 750 Make-A-Wish fulfillments. And people grill him all the time about not having children because he does make a wish. Like, it's one of those things where, like, he's of service. Why wouldn't you do this? And it's really interesting because I'm on the other side where I'm like, I actually regret not having more kids. I'm actually expecting one coming up here in March, but I wish I would have had more kids. And my mindset is I might be the most impactful person of my generation, but eventually I'm not going to be here. And I think the best way to do that is to raise people in my environment and cultivate them to be the next ones. There's an individuality. Like, if they're not called to it, it is what it is. If they look at me and like, man, you're kind of a kook dad, fuck off. Like, okay, well, you do you, kiddo. Like, whatever. I want to guide you and give you the tools, but at the end of the day, the world's your oyster. Have at her. So I'm a little bit different than that, but I love that perspective because, I mean, whatever, your challenge is different than my challenge. Kids might be my hurdle, but you might have really big clients that are relying on you to be a certain thing. And you might be like, man, I kind of need to rebrand. I kind of need to, maybe shift focus. Or, when you left Costa Rica, you might have had some clientele down there and you're like, I kind of got to do this. It's the same fear, just packaged differently, I think. But I kind of want to ask, like, all that being said, with people's why, because I want to get into an event that you're hosting, because I want you to talk about it, because I think it's amazing. I think it's revolutionary. I think I seen the gears turning when you were planning that event during the Warrior Games, when you went down to see the GOAT, Tony Robbins. I feel like you kind of almost looked at it, you're like, yeah, that's where the sauce is for sure. But before we dive into that, you talk about people's values, people's whys, before we get into the 5 bodies and all that sort of thing. Real quick, what's a direction somebody can take, or maybe it's a mindset shift. How do people find the why? Because like when I look at an Instagram reel of somebody living in Portugal doing drop shipping, I kind of want to do that. That kind of sounds cool, but it doesn't speak to me. I've never thought about it until I watched that 15-second video. So it's really not rooted in anything, right? So really, how do you get to that baseline of like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it's a big question. And there's no easy answer to it. There's no pill for it except hard work, which, isn't the most sellable product.
I mean, ayahuasca won't do it for you? What are you talking about?
No, definitely not. She'll help. And for some people, she'll give it to you, but for some, no. For me, the why, so there's kind of four different components here. There's our needs, there's our values, there's our purpose, and there's our why. Right. And I think why and purpose can get kind of mixed matched. They're two very different things, in my opinion. Understand your needs, understand your values, go after value-based targets. And in my opinion, that's how you stay on purpose. If you're acting from who you are and you're going after value-based targets that are in alignment with your, truly your values that you've defined, that you've adopted, that are 100% yours, then you're on purpose. The why is what you use to wake up every single day to do the work to get that purpose and to not let anything get in the way of it. So your why is almost the thing when you wake up and you go, I don't want to fucking do this today. Because we all have those days. I have those days. My why is what makes me go, giddy up, get it done. And so the way that I look at a why, and Simon Sinek's a great avenue for this, right? So I'm not, he's the why guy. But I kind of look at it, in three components. The first component is, what has life taught you? What pivotal moment in your life really created a level of direction for you? For me, it was going to juvenile detention at 14, and then being stuck in that world for so long. But that evolves, right? Like it can be, maybe for some people, it was during COVID, they had a big moment of epiphany. Maybe it was during the 2008 crash, someone had a big moment of epiphany. It's a moment that really, truly challenges you. And then you tune into that. What did that teach you? And then you take that teaching and you apply it to your life today. So as an example, if I go, when I was put away in juvenile detention at 14, I felt this entrapment. I felt like I was stuck and people, handcuffed me. I wasn't able to move. I felt totally chained to my reality, right? So that was the feeling that I had. And then I go now and I say, okay, what's chaining me to this reality? My excuses. My excuse that I'm tired or that I can't do it or I don't have enough money or I don't have the skill or this or that. And I go, okay, I'm chaining myself right now like I did in the past. So I can bring awareness to that. And then I go, well, if I'm chained right now, then I'm holding myself back from helping other people. And so it's up to me to break this chain right now so that I can be of service to the world. And that's the third component. So you go something from the past, you figure out how it affects you and drives you now, and then you attribute that to how you're going to make the world a better place. And in my opinion, when you can find those three components, you can find how what happened in the past manifests now, and then you can use the desire to serve others to help you really move through it and push through that now, then you have a really powerful why to move through whatever comes in your way. Because as an example, whenever something comes up that I feel limited by, I see the service that I want to give people on the other side of that thing. And I see the prison wall in front of me and I'm like, fuck that. No one's putting chains on me again. I am moving through this so that I can serve and make this world a better place. So that's a why that will help me accomplish anything. And that's a why that will get me up every single day to do the work, to be of service to the world based on a past experience of mine. Right. So it's a lesson that I learned, seeing how it manifests in that moment, and then ultimately tying it to how I want to make this world a better place. And when you have those components, which take work to find and awareness to like you have to cultivate a lot of awareness to get to a point where you can see the thing, see it now, and ultimately see how it's blocking you from getting where you want to go to serve. So that's the work. But once you have that, excuses don't matter, right? Excuses don't matter. Like if I wake up in the morning and I got to go for a run to just fire up the guys, and I go, it's raining, it's cold, there's probably a cougar in the bog. Fuck, I don't want to go out there. Then I sit there and I go, I'm chaining myself to this reality like I was chained when I was younger. And I need to be of service to my guys this morning because it's a new week and I got to show the fuck up for them. Does the cold, does the wet, does the cougar matter? No, it doesn't. I go and I get it done because that's a part of my purpose. So that's how I tie the why into my life and ultimately the work that I do.
Amazing. A part of me thought you were going to say, stop smoking, stop drinking, get more sleep, but that's a way better answer. Which I'm sure that doesn't hurt either, but
no, but it's so much deeper than that, right? Like those things are just symptoms. That's the problem with people wanting to just do those things. Like they're great. It's awesome to get rid of those things, but they're symptoms. They're not the actual root. Your why addresses the root. The why, everyone's always asked me, like, because I quit, I smoked for years, I quit, I drank my whole life, I drank my whole life, I quit, right? English is my second language. I did Coke for 12, 13 years. Every weekend, at least, I quit cold turkey. You just quit because the other side matters more. The why matters more. There's something that matters more. So it's like this is irrelevant. Goodbye. Right.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm not going to keep you here too much longer, but we got to talk about this event you got going on here, man, because I'm buzzing about it. I think it's fantastic. We talked earlier about the Warrior Games and doing things as a collective. I'm a purist at heart. I'm a traditionalist at heart. I think experiences and anything of value done in person is going to hold so much more weight and be so much more impactful than any Zoom, any movie, anything else that's not in person. When you can smell people, feel people, look at people, hear people, their breath, their story, their mannerisms, their body language, it's different. And I wasn't that open-minded until I seen you come back from Tony Robbins. You were a different person. You were offline to a degree, but you're still putting it in. You're still grinding away. You're still sending the midnight emails in the hotel room while you're out there doing your thing. If you even got back to your hotel room by midnight, it was absolutely bananas. I kind of feel the same way. I look back at that men's retreat doing things in person because I have the Wim Hof app. I've listened to YouTube tutorials, but man, when you do things in person, it matters. So tell people January 25th, what's this event you got going on? What's it all about? What can people expect? Drop it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I couldn't be more stoked, to be honest, about this. And you're right. Going to Tony Robbins was an eye opener for me. I've always loved events. I've ran retreats. I've done all that stuff, but I've never really put a ton of energy into it. And I was at Tony, and if you've been to a Tony event or anyone listening's been to a Tony event, they're crazy. They're hype. Like you're dancing, you're screaming, you're shouting. You're like, he goes all out. Like you are yelling what you are calling in at the top of your lungs. Everyone's freaking out. It's chaos, right? Like it's on a whole other level. And I love that. That's how I like to do things. And there was a guy next to me and I was talking to him and he was like, man, I haven't felt this alive in like years. He's like, I'm dancing, I'm moving, I'm like connected to you guys. This is great. And I sat there and I went, why do I have to spend 10K and take a week of my time to go down to Florida to get access to this? I went, why? So I sat there and I went, well, I'm not going to compare myself to Tony Robbins because he's Tony Robbins and I'm Cam MacDougall, but I'm good at building energy. I love putting on events, and I see a big void in the marketplace for ones that are fun value driven, and ultimately really create opportunities for people. And so I sat there and I went back to my hotel room and I started journaling and writing about it. And I came up with this concept of, I was calling it, I think like live limitless, or I don't remember, something like that before. And my branding guy helped me come up with We Own the Night. But I wrote down, okay, how do we have something that has the energy of a concert, the value of a seminar, and the depth of a deep chat with your friends in the sauna? It's like, how do we create something that has that? Because that's, in my opinion, like what's really missing in the event space. And so we came up with the concept, We Own the Night. It's going to be from 5 p.m. to midnight plus. I've got a bunch of awesome speakers coming. My mentor's coming to talk. I'm going to be talking all about the human mechanism, about the subconscious, about, working with this technology that we've been given. We've got a bunch of exercises to connect people. I'm working on getting a former fighter pilot to come in and do a talk on focus. So there's going to be a lot of valuable, really cool things. We've got a DJ coming in, Matt. So there's going to be a vibe, there's going to be energy, there's going to be a bunch of people there. And so it's combining networking with personal growth and going out to the club. And so I'm inviting people to dress up, swag out. We got a bartender coming who's making mocktails all night. So it's good. There's not going to be booze. It's not going to actually be a party in that sense, because we want everyone to be at a peak state. We don't want anyone to be kind of subdued. And we're going all in. We're going to play full out, and we're just going to have a fucking blast. And so this is kind of my plans to run this one in Victoria, because we've got our community here, work out kind of the kinks of it, run one in Vancouver, then run one in Toronto, and then hopefully take this thing down to the States. That's my plan in the end. So yeah, that's kind of what we're working with. And that's the vibe of the evening. And I couldn't be more pumped.
Where could people find more info on it?
Yeah, so we'll give you a link. You can put it in the show notes. But yeah, it's basically inbodied.co/we own the night registration. Yeah, go check it out, visit it. There's a bunch of info there. You can also go to my Instagram, check out my Instagram. I'm posting about it daily. I'll be updating on speakers and various things coming in for the evening. And yeah, hit me up, send me a message. I'm the one that works my DMs on Insta, so no worries there. If you have any questions, let me know. But this is going to be a great opportunity to drop in and have a blast.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Sounds wicked. And yeah, my one in-person experience with you was pretty impactful. So I can only imagine what something like this, when you have this amount of time to plan and you own it, right? Because you were a guest facilitator rather than it being your event. So I can only imagine the energy that's going to come from this. So yeah, kudos to you, man. That's going to be an amazing event. I'm stoked to hear more about it. And yeah, great stuff, man.
A pleasure, my brother. Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking the real questions. Thank you for doing what you do. It's an honor to speak with you here, man.
Yeah, appreciate it a ton, Cam. I'm not going to keep you any longer. I know you're a busy man. You got people's lives to change. Any final words before you jet off, or you're good?
I am good, man. Feeling
Awesome.
Very complete.
Awesome. All right. Well, till next time, guys. Peace. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Unmodern Podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, like and follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Unmodern Podcast. If you have suggestions for future guests, or if you're interested in being a guest yourself, please visit unmodernpodcast.com. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next episode.